Welcome to another episode of the InCamera podcast. I'm joined by my fellow council colleague, Joe Horneck. Joe is the councillor for Ward 6, which is Arundel and West Credit neighborhoods. And we both got elected in 2022 for the first time, although not the first time either of us ran. But welcome, Joe. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Appreciate you having me.
Let's talk about sort of your sort of personal background a little bit. You have this sort of banker moniker, and you have this I guess political junkie reputation a little bit. A fan of history and politics. Maybe talk about where you grew up, how you got into politics the way it is.
I mean, I grew up in Windsor there until I went away to university. So I remember my first campaign was 1997 federal campaign. All I did was honestly a friend of mine's brother was going to hammer in some signs, so I went out on a cold, rainy day and hammered in a few signs for Shaughnessy Cohen. That was a Chrétien victory. From there, I went on to university and got involved in youth politics, and the rest is history.
So then you worked for the Ontario Young Liberals. I know you did something with the Prime Minister at that point.
Finance Minister,
okay.
Paul Martin. I worked in his office as a summer student in 2000. Mr. Martin at the time was at the absolute height of his popularity. I mean, I think the polling numbers had him in like high 80% of people who wanted to see him as Prime Minister. Sadly, there was another person who was taking a little bit more time in that role. I actively was trying to help him move along in many a contentious meeting. And I think Mr. Martin was a fantastic guy. Sadly, he kind of got there at the tail end of a mandate. And I think in politics, the one thing I see over the decades is, people get an itch after about 10 years. And they need a change, and I think they were into year like 14 at that point. It's a shame. Like I think he was a great man, and he had a great way to give a speech in a way that I don't see a lot of people today can really get a room going the way he used to.
So you developed your political chops with Mr. Martin in those days, and then you went into banking.
Yeah, so I went and I did my master's degree in political economy in the UK. My wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, came over with me. We decided to stay on for a couple extra years after my degree, and so I got a job as a derivatives trader in London. Really exciting time, exciting place. You show up at your desk by 6 a.m. or don't bother showing up at all. And, you stay till 8 o'clock at night, and then you barely go home to sleep, and then you turn around and do it the next day again. And
so now you live in Mississauga.
Yep.
You and Laura are married. You got 3 kids, Alex, Cllr, James.
Yep.
And you decide to run for municipal government.
Yeah. And I think, I love municipal government personally because it's the thing closest to people's lives. That's what makes me interested in it too. I think unlike the other levels of government, which maybe were my attraction when I was younger, a municipal politician only needs to convince 5 other colleagues that they're on the right path with something. And that's much more attractive. And it's the things you touch in your daily life every day, right? It's the glass of water in front of us, and does it come out of my tap properly every morning? The fire trucks and, paving the roads. And it's the stuff you tangibly see and can do something about that make meaningful changes in people's lives. It's not, as I always say, go solve national defense. Give me a decade and several $1 trillion and sure, I can solve that for you. But that's not a realistic thing. So
your impact's much more immediate. It's closer. It's local.
It's more meaningful. And, I think the other side is too, you're far more accessible than the other levels of government, right? I've had a few people in my office today. One person had a dispute with a neighbor over some construction. Another person cares a lot about graffiti stickers on the side of all the signs of everything. And the city's efforts to kind of go after a couple of people who are pretty blatant about that.
Yeah.
And just, that it's graffiti in our neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
It makes us feel less comfortable with our neighborhood. And so those are the kinds of things you actually have to care about, though, at a municipal level. Both people, said to me, like, we can see that you actually care. And I think that matters to me, that you do have to think about, it's not just a person, it's not just a voter, it's something that's right in front of you. It's your community. You live there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually my wife, Rebecca, says that to me all the time. When I worked in the provincial government, she's like, yeah, these are, you're doing interesting things. It's kind of abstract. Like your policy changes will affect, the greater system on some level. But what you guys are talking about right now, like you're talking about the safety of the roads in front of our house, in front of our kids' schools. You're talking about the speed limits. You're talking about 911 emergency services, how quickly they'll get to you.
Yeah.
You're talking about the, quality of life in your neighborhood, right? And the parks that you have and things like that. And, there's this narrative that I've heard that if the federal government disappeared tomorrow, you wouldn't notice probably for a few months. What do you actually need from the federal government your passport renewal, or maybe you're going
Yeah.
through an immigration process or whatever it is.
The Russians aren't storming the beaches tomorrow.
No, no. But if the province disappeared tomorrow, your schools would close down, your hospitals would close down. It would take you a little while before you realize you really needed some of those things, unless your kids are in school. But if the municipality stopped working, you'd notice right away.
Yeah. I mean, when your garbage doesn't get picked up.
Yeah. When no one answers the phone when you call 911.
Yeah. Nobody
Yeah.
answers 911. You notice that pretty quick. There's that expectation, right?
Yeah.
And I think to the point of the challenges being more realistic, and just in the time that you and I have been on council, we had a problem with people being able to answer 911 fast enough, and we had to take actions to make sure that improved, because it was getting to the point of unacceptability where people are really questioning an absolute essential basic task that a municipality has to deliver on. What am I going to do in an emergency? And if you can't answer that question, it's that old Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
That's number one: safety and security.
Well, and I've told this story publicly before, but my dad fell off the roof trying to, fix some shingles or whatever he was doing. Luckily, my brother was home. His arm was bleeding, the bone was through the skin. He was bleeding everywhere, and my brother had called 911, and this was before we made the upgrades to NG 911, next generation 911, and it was like 8.5 minutes on hold and never got through. And my brother decided to just put him in the car and drive him to the hospital as opposed to wait for an ambulance, because responses weren't there. And that's what people expect. And it's unacceptable to not have that level of service that you expect from your 911. And luckily we were able to make the right investments to change that.
Yep.
And we're leading the way now. And I think it's just a few seconds now. That's kind of the wait list, which is good.
Yeah. I was in the police doing a ride along a couple weeks ago, and the response times were so much lower than just the 3 years ago when you and I went for that last tour. And that's a lot better, right? And I think that brings up, I guess, maybe another aspect of municipal politics that appeals to probably you and me is, you could be analytical. Like we were just talking about response times and how do you crunch those numbers. And then people like you and me get into our thought processes of breaking down processes of how can get people there faster and what's in the way and what can I do. And I think the other interesting part about municipal government for me and my banking background would be just those opportunities when you have to crunch numbers and make sense of an issue, and then hopefully communicate that to the public on why it matters, right? And I think we're seeing that right now with ASC cameras is a good example.
Speed cameras.
Cameras, yeah. So I can recite all the statistics from in front of my daughter's school. I haven't remembered the boys' school, but I remember my daughter's school off the top of my head. And somebody blew through there at 102 kilometers in a 30. I've had people at the door say to me, well, but what if it was 2 a.m? It doesn't matter. A little 2-lane street, 102 kilometers an hour, you don't have control of the car. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. or 2 p.m. So, I mean...
Yeah, these are still residential neighborhoods.
That's
People
right.
could lose control and go into your living room.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think taking data and being able to tell people why it's important in their lives is important as well, right? And I think it's a good part about municipal politics, telling people to take the complex, but to make it applicable to them specifically. And if you told somebody that happened in front of their kid's school, you're going to say that's the value of, taking action on street safety.
I feel like there's the inverse sort of priority of people and engagement with municipal government, right? I mean, we have the fewest number of people who vote in municipal elections, yet it affects their lives so much more than they realize, right? You need to call 311. You have all these challenges in your community, your parks, all of this that you deal with on a more regular basis versus the higher voter turnout governments that maybe aren't as effective on your day-to-day. But I kind of want to get into your persistence here, because you obviously love municipal government and you've run for municipal government 3 times. Your last election, you were wildly successful. You got over 60%.
Yeah.
60, what was it?
60, 25, 15 were the 3 breakdowns of percentages.
Yeah. So that's you ran away with it, right? And you were one of only 6 people who have ever defeated an incumbent in the history of Mississauga. So that's a pretty big accomplishment on that front alone. But you were persistent because you ran in 2 previous elections where you just missed out by like 300 votes.
315 and 347.
So when
you live every number of that.
So when you tell people every vote matters, you know that every vote matters.
Every vote
and you
matters.
tell people you need to be engaged because it makes a difference.
And I mean, the hardest thing about the voter engagement side municipally too is especially when you'd meet somebody that's kind of at our point of life, right? So somebody who's in their career, who has some kids, who you're meeting at a door, which might as well be your door. And yet you're talking to them, they're engaged on the issues, and you know that statistically they're not likely coming. They just either don't have the time, they don't prioritize it. That's the hard part about municipal, but I bet they still vote federally and provincially.
Yeah.
And I think that's...
Well, the numbers would show that, right?
That's right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I mean, the hard thing about, and I guess now that I've run a couple of times, the thing you really notice in municipalities is, no one knows what a Joe is. They immediately want to pin you. Are you liberal, conservative? Are you NDP? Are you... And then also you get like, where is your family from? Like, people are desperate to try to, other than the words coming out of your mouth, identify a thing about you that they can relate to.
Right.
Because no one knows what a Joe is. There's no Joe party. It's population of one. There's no Alvin party, population one, right? And so not having that shorthand of saying, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, I'm this, really people take time to grasp what you are, and then they feel, until they get to know you, which an incumbent benefits from, that they have a stake in actually getting out there and separating you. And because on a municipal ballot, there's no filtering of a party mechanism to say, we've looked at this person, we've vetted this person, we're going to put their brand behind that person. Anyone can run with $100 municipally.
Yeah. And we've seen that. We've seen some ballots with an insane number of people.
Yeah. And so the first race I ran in Ward 6, there was 26 candidates.
Because it was an open by-election.
Open by-election.
Yeah.
I mean, I always kind of joke that the two people who were dead last and second last both had the last name Siddiqui. They did not run any campaign I could detect. And they had both had less than 10 votes. I don't think it's a reflection of the name. I think it's a reflection.
They split the Siddiqui vote, obviously.
They split the Siddiqui vote. If
yeah.
only had been together, maybe they would have been successful. But, there was just half of those 26 people ran no campaign at all. No lawn signs, no literature, no door knocking that I could detect whatsoever. The other half that did was where the real action was. But there's so much confusion when there's that many candidates.
Yeah.
How do you separate it, right? And so I think one of the only successful ways you see that would be large name endorsements, which in other cities has been more the tradition. In this city has been very, very rare.
Well, we don't really have our own sort of media outlets, at least not like a major market media outlet that covers just Mississauga. We don't have a daily paper anymore. You have the Pointer, you have the Mississauga News that does stuff online in Sauga that likes to do listicles as well.
Yeah.
Top 5 places to eat. And we'll get to some of the best places in Ward 6. But how do you think in this sort of complicated, challenging environment, media-wise, and political landscape, can we get more people interested in what's happening and running in municipal politics? Because, we don't have parties. Maybe we should. But, how do we engage more people to find a way to run? Because we do need better people in politics, especially on the municipal level.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also, as you say, it's the most challenging to communicate what's happening in the city. And even when we feel things like the budget are top of our mind around City Hall, and the few people who ever watch City Council on a regular basis know all about it. If you read a newspaper article, maybe you have some sense that it's vaguely coming around. But, you sit there and, we've been councillors for 3 years now, and I watched council for 8 years before that, like every single episode. I know that's
a TV show.
Yes.
Maybe a boring TV show.
That was my routine. Like, I'd do my work at the bank, I'd be at Bank of Montreal or Tokyo Mitsubishi or whatever, Friday, Saturday night. That's what I did after the kids went to bed. And I'd take notes about who said what about what if I found it interesting. And so that was the benefit of having done that. I knew all the issues when I came in as a councillor. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a lot of learning curve. But how do we engage more people? It's going to be really hard. I think we need to find new ways to get into people. I think both you and I have said things like, what if there was a City of Mississauga app that would be on your phone? I can imagine a world where if that app knew where I lived, it could ping me construction that's going to happen within my neighborhood in the next couple weeks.
Yep.
It could ping me that leaf cleanup is coming.
Yep.
It could tell me that at the local community center, signups are happening for swim lessons. I can imagine that a lot of the things I just mentioned, people would find very valuable, but we don't have such an application right now. And it is that really granular type stuff, right? Not everyone wants to take a swimming lesson. You'd have to have it configured to that. But we also know that most people don't read our press clippings and know about all the things we do. And we have a lot of public meetings that there are more city staff at than there are members of the public. And we wonder why.
It drives me crazy when people say, I didn't know about that, because we do everything in our ability at our disposal to get out there. What we're doing right now in terms of a podcast is another form of communication that we're trying to get our content about what we're working on here at the city out to the public.
Yeah.
Because there's no other way. Like, we have to engage with them. But we put up road signs. We deliver door to door. We even knock door to door to tell people, there's a meeting coming up. You should maybe come. You might be interested in this. Sometimes it's Canada Post. Sometimes it's just flyers. It's paying for ads online. And yet people are still saying, you didn't do anything to reach out. And I'm like, I don't know what else I could have done, but we tried as much as we could.
Yep.
And if you can, please subscribe. Please follow our newsletters. Joe's got a great newsletter. You can do one digitally, and you can get the one that comes in person. And most of us do. Most councillors here do, and we're trying to share information. No one's obfuscating or trying to hide these things. These are, many times legislatively mandated for us to communicate with people. Mm-hmm. And at other times, we're trying to inform you because we're also trying to get feedback. Yeah. And that's one of the great things about municipal government is we really want your feedback. Like, we really do seek consultation with residents and neighbors to say, hey, do you want these speed humps in front of your neighborhood? Do you think it's going too fast? Okay, here are some of the solutions that we've got. Let's vote on it. Tell us if you support this or not, right? And sometimes I think we almost overdo it, right? Especially when it comes to larger projects that aren't so granular and so micro-targeted. But to your point, there are other ways of communication that we can continue to work on. I know the Region Appeal, you have the let me know when my garbage or recycling or organics text. Yep. And I subscribe to that, and it reminds me every Sunday night what I got to put out. Yep. Right? And so we should do that at the city too.
It's hard to get out there, but it's because even if we develop that app and if it's out there, there are still a lot of people in our communities who are also not very digital.
That's true.
Older persons, people who just don't want to do it. Like I always will have things when I consult with people and they'll just say, no, I don't read your flyer because I don't have an email. And I'll be like, wow, I don't think about that very often in my life. But especially some older adults in a few particular neighborhoods, they don't have an email. They don't want to communicate that way. If it's not in print, they don't register it. But I also had people who you do the Canada Post drop and they'll say, oh, nothing ever came to my mailbox. It'll be like, really? Because I have 11 RSVPs from your neighbors.
Yep.
So magically the postman went to their houses, but not yours? I don't know how that would happen.
Yeah. Or they threw it out and they don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't look at it. And so we can feed it to them as much as possible. They have to consume it.
Yes.
Let's get into a bit of some of the committees and some of the work that you've done. You were a transit advocate for a long time. You were part of I think it was the GTA West Transit Summit. I can't remember the name of it exactly.
It's a complex name, yes. Poor marketing, let's say.
And now, after you got elected, you constituted a new committee, which is the Transit Advisory Committee.
Yep.
You're the chair. I'm actually the vice chair.
Yeah.
And really just wanted to give you a chance to sort of talk about, why is that important to you, and what are some of the challenges of transit in a city like Mississauga, which is, trying to retrofit a city that was built for cars.
Yeah, I mean, so this goes back to, say what you do. So I always said that I found it, inappropriate that a city of this size had no transit committee. And, Bill, who works in my office, his mom lives in Port Credit, Ontario, and Port Hope. And they have a transit committee for the 2 buses they have. And yet, we were the 3rd largest city in the province and one of the largest transit systems, and we didn't have any public input through a transit committee, and I thought that was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And there were some more senior members of council who said, this is going to be an abject failure. All you're going to get is somebody saying, well, my bus didn't show up on time this morning. And I'm like, no, I think we can have some strategic conversations, as we did in that Western GTA Summit a decade ago, which kind of got me my first chance to do media and, be an advocate outside of my day job. I think that was a lot of fun. But that was from a citizens getting together saying, how do we want our transit system to work better? And, we wrote a report. It was, 50, 60 pages of what we thought was well-researched and well-thought-out stuff. That was one of those, right moment, right time things. So we put out this report. We had a little press conference. A couple of media outlets came at best. But we sent it to everybody we could. And Toronto Star picked up as an article and said, oh, isn't this admirable? local citizens, just average engineers and bankers and other things, writing what they want to see. They wrote an article, and it triggered every radio station and every other media outlet to then call the following day and try to book me specifically to talk about this. And it was right at the right point of, I think it was Kathleen Wynne's re-election campaign. Her first campaign.
So 2014.
Yeah, 14. And it hit at the right moment where that was the big topic on the agenda provincially. And so it became part of that narrative around that just before that campaign happened. And it was good work. I mean, I think a lot of the things we wrote in that report actually came true. Things like having Wi-Fi available at stations for GO trains, and making sure that you're more tightly integrated between your Toronto Transit, your Mississauga Transit, your Brampton Transit, and not having these large gaps. And I think those services do a lot better job at that now than they previously did.
So let's go through some of the accomplishments, or what have we been able to do to improve transit here in Mississauga?
So, I mean, I think the main thing on that committee, and I think since you and I have been on council the last 3 years, is there's a bit of a change in tenor of the importance of transit because we're a more mature city. And now that we're doing things like looking at not having parking minimums when we build a giant building, right? So not saying every single apartment must have 1.5 parking spaces, and just defining that the car is our main method of transportation if you're on a major arterial road. Bringing in that transit committee and that public, interest also has made my way have to think about how they're engaging more with the public. What are they saying? Are they actually getting their plans out there? Are they getting public input at the earlier stages than the later stages? I feel like it's helpful. I also feel like it's been helpful that the last 2 years we've added 8% to the transit budget consecutively, hiring a lot more drivers.
Which is your motion.
Yeah. Those are my motions. But, had we not done the groundwork to show that there was interest, I don't know that would have happened, because it had not really happened much in the city's history. Transit, when this was a suburb and not a city, was, that's the thing that students and poor people take. It was not a top of the matter thought.
No, and I talk a lot about this around the transportation system that we're trying to create, right? We're giving people options. We're giving people alternatives. How do they get around the city? 90+% of all the trips taken in the city of Mississauga are done by car. If we want to make traffic better for cars and for drivers, we need a better transportation system for transit. For cyclists, for pedestrians, so that they have alternatives to get around. And they're not going to do that if the bus isn't reliable, if it's full and driving by and doesn't have enough drivers and doesn't have enough service. So I think that's helped change quite a bit of that narrative.
Your basic customer service, which is honestly what every industry thinks about, is how do I make the friction points for my customers go away? And I feel like, that is far more on the agenda even before we came on, but just the last, several years, it's a way we're moving, and that'll encourage more transit users.
Well, and we're doing some innovative things too. I mean, we've got free transit for kids now that we've linked up with the province. The One Fare is a good move. Free transit for seniors. We're getting some hydrogen buses. So Mississauga can be a place, and is a place, that we can take the opportunity to innovate and do some new things, which are interesting around transit.
Sure. And I think sometimes people don't always appreciate how analytical we are about it. We know every time somebody taps on that bus. So we know at that specific stop how many people have gotten on today, yesterday, a month ago. We can plan our routes accordingly. We know how busy or not busy a bus is, and we can take one off that's less busy and put it onto the busier route. Every 6 weeks, they have what they call the board, and they go through all the analytics of where we should reassign buses to based on the volumes. And, that's data intensive, and we need analysts to do that now. It's not that you can just drive the bus and all of a sudden someday become the transit manager. We need professional managers, because we're at the scale where that's the thing. We still value our drivers. Of course we do. If without them, it goes nowhere, and we need them to be having positive interactions. But I think the challenge is there was a point where we were bleeding the system a bit dry, and we were having a negative cycle. So the bus was late, so the customer is angry. So they get angry at the driver. So the driver responds sometimes with negativity. And it's a negative cycle. And now I think we're trying to go in the opposite direction, having a positive cycle, right?
So these are the things we can control as a municipal government. There's a lot of things around this that we can't control. And really talking about the big projects, rapid transit projects, Hurontario LRT, the downtown loop, rapid transit expansion, all of this is dependent on the provincial government and even the operating. Toronto, Ottawa, they both got new deals for their transit systems where they got their operating funding paid for. We're still sitting here as the third largest system, sort of saying, what about us?
Yeah.
And now we have a Huron-Ontario LRT that's years late and is going to be even more years before it's ready to go. And so, I mean, that must frustrate you in terms of where the province is on these larger projects.
I mean, it is frustrating. So traditionally in Ontario, over many decades, the province and the federal government have only ever contributed to capital, right? So if you need to buy a new bus, sure, we'll help you out there. But you have to run it. You have to pay for the day-to-day operations, which actually is a much vaster expense, right? This, as you said, the deals for Ottawa and Toronto are the first operational dollars that have ever kind of really gone into transit. Because if you look at how much does a bus fare in Los Angeles cost versus here, I mean, it's less than half in Los Angeles what it would be here, even with the dollar adjustment, right? So we have in Ontario, especially, a super expensive system, $4 a tap in many cases to get on or off. And, it reflects our transit system, right? Like, it's an expensive system, so we don't have as many riders. At other jurisdictions around the world, a federal or provincial level government would be contributing to operating every day of the week, not just special occasions, not just specific projects. And, you talk about how great Europe is in Asia. Yeah, well, those federal governments in those countries spend money on day-to-day operations for every little bus line. And in Canada, we don't do that.
I mean, one of the main reasons, we obviously don't have the fiscal capacity to pay for these multi-billion-dollar projects.
That's true, too.
And so it's not even like we could go off and build our own subway as the city of Mississauga if we wanted to.
No, not if you want to stay solvent.
No, and we've made some mistakes in the past where we didn't allow the province to install a subway in Mississauga.
Yep, the old Hazel McCallion had 2 chances at a subway and said no both times. I've heard that story a few times. It's unfortunate, but I mean, and I don't want to pretend like Hazel was a deep friend and we had this huge relationship. We knew each other casually, but I did see her a few days before she passed, and I asked her as a brand new councillor. We had just won the election. What did you regret? What would you have done differently? And what should I be doing as councillor? And over that conversation, she said a couple of things. She wished in the years that she'd froze property taxes for a decade, she wished she'd just done like 1%, 2%, something very small where she could have kept financial restraint, but also still built the bank account a small amount and have more reserves for a longer period of time and save for the fact that now the city's in the point where all those pipes, all those roads need to get replaced. That boom period of the 80s and 90s, roads last 40 years. Guess what date we're coming up to, right? Another one was she said, better transit system, that they would have designed the city and the suburbs specifically, different road configurations that supported transit better. And the last one she said was she wished she'd allowed a little bit more density at the major intersections. Because there are some major intersections where there is no density whatsoever. It's single story. Like, look at Mavis and Bernenthorpe just down the road from us.
Yeah. Or you go 5 and 10, I mean, was almost the downtown of Mississauga, yet there's nothing really sort of downtown about it.
Yep. And so there's a lot of places where over time you can correct that. But when you had farmers' fields everywhere, you had an opportunity. Now, to credit her, like, you don't know what you don't know. And you built the community that everybody asked you to build, right? And
which at the time was a sleepy suburb, single-family homes.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true, right? So you built the city that people asked you to build. It's in retrospect you think of these things.
But one of the things I want to get across more, and let's start getting into the budget here, because I think that most people don't understand, a lot of politicians on municipal side don't understand, is that sort of cost of the infrastructure over time, right? And so when you look at Mississauga as large as it is, almost 300 square kilometers, and the fact that 70% of our homes are single family homes, and that most of them are on, cul-de-sacs, crescents, roads that don't connect to other places, where they're essentially private driveways, with the 40-year infrastructure cycle, with, aging pipes and things like that, you start crunching the math and realize this is not fiscally sustainable. We can't manage a city this large at a tax rate that we've kept artificially low for a while in certain times. that now has to renew on a massive scale, right? And that, if you watch some of those sort of strong towns or other advocates for urbanism, they show you that your tax dollar per acre for, say, the massive buildings we're looking at across the street are significantly higher, and the ones that are actually paying for and subsidizing more of those other single family homes across the rest of Mississauga.
Yeah.
So let's get into like last year's budget or the budget before. You and I, we both voted against the budget last year. I think we probably had similar reasons, but I want to give you a chance to sort of express your reasons. Because people have talked to us about affordability being their number one concern. And actually, if you poll it, taxes are the second concern, which I would argue is also affordability.
It's the same thing.
So it's the same thing. This is one of the few tools that we actually control in terms of what the property tax rate is. Now, is it responsible to keep it artificially low for a decade? No. But can we do something that helps people for a short period of time where they're particularly struggling, where food bank use is higher than it's ever been in the history of our community, our city, our country? I think we have a responsibility to do as much as we can and try to find more savings and be leaner for a couple of years till we can get out of this for better times. Then we can go back. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I always say to members of the public who asked what happened that I had a particularly different view than a majority of council. A majority of council decided to add new services, both at the city and the region. And when I say services, I also mean staff, right? So on the policing side, bylaw enforcement side, programs for seniors, additional snow clearing on sidewalks, additional snow clearing on windrows, leaf pickup, animal services, more paramedics, more senior citizen home attendants. Like, that's not even the entirety of the list. For the most part, I mostly said, can we do less? You want 20 staff? Can we do 10? And when I came up with some of my amendments and proposals, which were many, and I went back to staff. I didn't just propose a number out of my head. I went and I worked with it. I crunched them when I said, okay, 20 to 10, what would that look like? What would these staff be? What would that, I did my homework and I tried to find ways to rein it in a bit. But fundamentally, I'm just kind of like, this is not a year to add a brand new service. And unfortunately, I guess I feel unfortunately, a majority of council went the other way. And that's fair. It's two different points of view. To council's credit, not a single person showed up in our audience saying spend less. Not one last year, and I believe not one the year before. They come after the budget is done, but no one was there to express that I'm having a hard time right now. I need you guys to not add a service this year. As nice as that service is, as much as there is somebody in the audience right now asking for that service, and on a lot of the topics I just rhymed off, there was someone in the audience asking for that.
Yeah.
So council responded to those who showed up. And that goes back to our communications problems. Engagement. And so my feedback when everybody opened their bill and their eyes bled and their, in June when they read the bill, and I said, well, what the heck happened? I said, well, nobody came. I made the argument. No one was there. Yeah. I mean, I had a few colleagues like yourself, but even you and I didn't agree on every single detail of every single aspect, right? No. And that's the beauty of council. It's not a party line whip vote or some crazy thing like that. We can have little things. I can agree on leaves. You can disagree on leaves, vice versa. But I fundamentally thought it wasn't a time to add services. Going into this year, I feel like our colleagues have heard that cry and are feeling that much more. I feel like the police services realized that it was a little too much. As much as we need those officers, as much as we need that infrastructure, it was a lot to digest in one bite. And so I hope that we'll see a little bit less this year. And these are all good initiatives. Not one of those things was a bad idea, but it's just when they come too much at once.
Yeah, it's also about timing. I mean, that final budget in the city of Mississauga it did pass, but it was 8-4.
Yes.
Right. So I mean, it was probably one of the more contentious budgets we've had. I don't know if previous budgets have always kind of been unanimous.
Most were unanimous. Maybe you would have a dissent, but
this was quite a bit of dissent.
In the 3 years we've been council and in the 8 years before that I watched council, I don't remember more than a single dissent.
Yeah.
Almost any year.
Well, and the final budget vote is not necessarily reflective of all the different motions and amendments that get tabled, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, you and I worked on, I think the first year we were here, trying to use or lower the amount that we had set aside.
Yeah, for infrastructure.
For infrastructure, saying, instead of 3%, how about 2% or 1%?
Well, and for the years before that, it had been 2%.
Right. So why did we need to increase it this particular moment?
Yes.
Right. And when I ran for mayor, we had a fully costed budget because we wanted to show people we wanted to freeze taxes for 2 years, but we weren't doing it in an irresponsible way where we were just, saying we're just going to take less revenue. We had a bit of a rainy day fund. We were going to use some of that. We were also going to generate revenue in other places, right? It's a zero-sum game, but there's other places that we can increase and then spend on that. So, we wanted to make sure that it was responsible, but it does feel like there are some traditions or tendencies of staff to propose a certain budget that's always going to increase a certain amount, that's always going to allow for new staff and new programs to launch, whereas in difficult times you got to make tough decisions and you got to be able to say, you know what, I know everyone would love windrow clearing, sure, who wouldn't want that?
Yeah,
but it's a $40 million program in a year that we can't afford to add that much money onto the tax base.
Yeah.
And so we ended up with a 9.2% increase. Half of that is regional, but it forecasted a 10% increase this year.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I don't know if Mississaugans are likely to take to the streets, but if we come in with another double-digit increase, it's not going to be good.
No. And so, I mean, I think to that point, we've already had a little bit of action on the budget. So, as you know, and you supported and voted for, in June, myself and Councillor Butt brought forward 2 different motions to the Region Appeal. One, to suspend any new staff increases next year with the exception of paramedics and police, and to freeze hiring. And second, to cut 2% off of each department, except police. So, those are actually passed unanimously at the region. But they were passed in June, when I think everyone is having that feedback from people saying, what the heck did you do there? And it wasn't just us two. Brampton felt it. Caledon felt it. It was a unanimous vote at the region on both of those 2 items. We then brought that back to the city, however, and it was a 50-50 tie vote on the 2% reduction.
Which fails.
And it failed. So, at council right now, there is the perception that the region is more of the financial issue and that there's less scrutiny on the city, I think. Admittedly, last year it was a large part of the bill. But I think it's easier to also, as a councillor, kind of, feel like you're more protective of city and less at the region, I feel. Because, those services are also less tangible than maybe the ones we talked about before. Like the roads are your roads for the most part. I mean, forgetting regional roads is a common.
This is one of the stupidest things ever.
Yeah,
I tell people that when you're driving down Winston Churchill, it's a city road until it's not, and then it is again, and then it's not again.
Yes.
And it's just based on where you are in Mississauga.
It makes no sense.
And we have traffic engineers at the region, and traffic planners at the region and the city, and
It makes no sense.
technicians for lights and different contracts for snow, and I'm like, it's wild
It is wild.
how inefficient it is.
Well, or even like an example was, at one point, the region was going to do a survey of all trees on regional roads, and we'd already done the work.
Yeah, the city had already done the work.
Yeah, and it was a couple $100,000 contract, if I remember correctly. And we said, stop. And by the way, why didn't you just ask us? Because we have them all digitally mapped. Here's the data. But, that's the problem with these kind of overlaps, right? I
learned more and more that they don't operate as if like one government is greater than the other, like Ontario and the feds. But they actually operate as 2 separate municipalities that have overlapping boundaries.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And different mandates in terms of what they're supposed to do, right? Where their operations are, which isn't great. But I'm glad they've downloaded planning. They're planning on downloading roads. Waste is kind of next. I think in 2027, they're talking about water, wastewater, and potentially having a public service corporation of some kind.
Some kind of utility model, yeah.
Yeah, a utility model. And whether or not that'll work, my concern has always been around what's that going to cost and what does that mean in terms of what people are going to be paying? Because right now we control the water rates.
Yes.
If we spin off a municipal utility that is profit motivated, which isn't bad if you're trying to find efficiencies, but does that mean they're going to be raising rates because we have one of the lowest rates anywhere in Ontario.
We do. I mean, I think of it even before that is I think of the governance, because the governance is the incentive. So if you were to appoint a professional managerial board who doesn't have a tie back to ratepayers in an electoral way, then you don't have incentive for restraint in terms of if a developer is saying, I need more pipe here, I need more pipe there, I need more pipe here. Yeah, just put the pipe and jack the rate. I mean, I think whatever model we go at, I think it's essential that we have some kind of public feedback from an electability standpoint.
Absolutely.
Of ownership of what happened with that rate. Because otherwise, as is said very many times at the region, we have one of the best water systems in the country. It's one of the cheapest in the province by a bunch. We provide water to York region, half of it, as well as all of Peel. And messing with that, you know, even if it's pension funds who are maybe not like a hedge fund, like mercilessly, I need to squeeze every penny out of you. But there's still that moment where you're going to want to do certain things that maybe don't always align with that. So it's going to be a tough bind.
And I kind of use
checkpoint.
People like using the example of, oh, it could be like Electra. I'm like, yeah, Electra's profitable and we get a significant dividend.
It's owned by the cities, though.
Yeah,
it's not owned by the province.
But it's also got that disconnect in terms of governance where, you know, half of it's a managerial board. The other half is political appointees.
Yeah.
But I don't have a direct line there. You don't have a direct line there.
No.
And that means when my residents call me or your residents call you to sort of say, I'm having this problem with Electra, I don't have the same ability to get things done for our residents.
We also don't have the same kind of like updates on like what's happening. What's the plan?
Yeah.
Like we've been getting a lot of that more lately, but you know, it's an easy thing to understand. If someone doesn't report to you, even in an indirect way, their incentive to tell you everything that's happening is so much less. Their incentive to be responsive to you, like, and when I say you, I mean you and me on behalf of our resident. Right? Mrs. Smith had the power line fall down, or it's not doing something right. Get out there and fix it. You know, I know that you will feel the same way as I do. If that was a road sign, a stop sign that fell over, I know how fast our staff are going to be out there.
Yeah.
I have less clarity on Electra. Not that I know that they're going to do a bad job, but I just have less clarity on what they're going to do. And so I worry that if a water organization were to come forward that doesn't have that contact with elected officials, you wouldn't have that.
Yeah, service might get worse. I mean, it's easy. Mississauga has, you know, essentially spent 51 years now saying they didn't want the region.
Yes.
And that we could have been an independent city. And so, you know, it is easy to sort of fall back and blame the region on a lot of things. Now they do a lot of important work. It's just, how can we do that better, right? And sometimes I do feel that there's less oversight because it seems more disconnected than when we're here. We don't have offices there.
No.
Right? I mean, we have offices here. We have staff here.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist on the regional level.
And also, you know, it's the number of stakeholders. So there's 25 of us at the region. And so as an individual, there's 24 others. And it feels like it's harder to maybe get around an issue versus here at the city, you feel more connected with a smaller group, right? Yeah, I mean, I guess you could look at governance models of the region and see how that could be improved as well, right?
Okay, so Joe, you're a data 3. What are some of your sort of favorite activities to take your kids around to in your neighborhood or in Mississauga as a whole?
Yeah, data 3. So my oldest son, Alex, baseball and hockey, competitive leagues, which is driving us a little bit mental.
Yeah, I hear you on that one.
Yeah. My daughter, Cllr, 9, and she loves dance, and she was doing swimming lessons. She's just decided to give that up recently. And then my little guy, James, only 4, just started junior kindergarten, and he's just a ball of energy. It doesn't need activities to be a handful.
We're only about 5 years apart, but you had your kids. So I have 3 kids in 4 years.
Yeah.
You had 3 kids in 10 years?
10 years. Yeah.
So
5-year gaps. They'll never be in the same school ever again.
That's tough.
So they're at 3 different schools right now, from high school to kindergarten. And because my daughter's in the French immersion, she's at a 3rd school. So.
Wow. That's a lot. And I mean, you've got Riverwood in your neighborhood that you guys that you're
place.
Quite involved with.
Especially this time of year. Like if anyone doesn't know the Riverwood Conservancy, they really need to get out there and see it, because many times Riverwood has made the leaf peeping lists of best places in the GTA. There's also the amazing community gardens there. There's a whole stack load of hundreds of volunteers who keep the community gardens going. It's a fantastic organization. There's another one where before I was councillor, I've been to every AGM for them for 8 or 9 years because I just love the organization. And it's in my neighborhood. It's, 10-minute walk from my house or 3-minute drive. It's a great place. So Riverwood, River Grove, everything's river in my
Yeah, because you're next to the river. Yeah.
River Grove, great community center. Very, very busy community center. So, for instance, we did a number of new seniors programs last budget where different programs are now free. And the majority of where the people are using that service is River Grove and Meadowvale. Because we have the pool at each of those places that attract a lot of seniors and the nature of the neighborhoods. Yep. And so I know I felt the brunt of that because all of a sudden a previously paid program, which paying, keeps a few people back from participating. Now we have a free program and it's overrun.
Yeah, everyone can go.
And the people who previously paid are most part wanting to pay in order to get that exclusivity, right?
Best program that you wish more people knew about at the city.
I guess a related program to the city would be Neighborhood Watch. I think one of the challenges of my area is it doesn't have any of the old towns. So it's not Streetsville, it's not Clarkson, it's not Port Credit, it's not those things. It was at one point just farmland. Mm-hmm. Arundel, maybe, I maybe correct myself on that. That is a bit of an older neighborhood. But there isn't a lot of connectivity that you have in those older neighborhoods. There isn't a central place to come together. Like even when I want to host my public meetings, if I have it up at River Grove, the community center in my neighborhood, it's in the far left-hand corner, west-hand corner of my ward. It does not serve for a central meeting spot. So I'm struggled with geography and that bringing together. But Neighborhood Watch brings neighborhoods together. I always say it starts with the negative, a worry about security, but it can turn into the positive about bringing people together and turning it into a neighborhood barbecue or get together. Right. And I think there's a really interesting program we're going to have to look at next term of council. Brampton gives out $1,500 to any neighbors of, I think it's 20 houses that get together and say they want to have an association. Yep. They give them $1,500
insurance
to host an event, to close the road, for insurance, for some food, $1,500 a year, and it brings people together. And I think that's something you might want to look at. For the grand scheme of the city, it's a small amount of money if you're making people feel more attached to their neighborhood and city.
Mm-hmm. Favorite places to eat?
Well, you'll know the chili chicken house.
Yep.
And the dumpling house.
Yep.
I think
I introduced you to the dumpling house.
You did introduce me to the dumpling house. Well, that's the one challenge in my neighborhood is we have great East Asian food.
You have what I call New Chinatown in Mississauga, which is kind of Golden Square and that I guess Burnham Thorpe and Central Parkway area, right?
Yeah. So there's a ton of East Asian places, honestly, you can go into so many different places for different things. So those are all great. I guess my favorite pub would be Cooper's, also not far from there. And I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll say that if I'm going out for a family dinner, my favorite place to go would be the Keg. I usually only get there for my birthday once a year. But, the one thing about my family is the thing we can all agree on is Italian.
Yep. Okay. Fair enough.
Although even within that, as my wife recently pointed out, when we're cooking dinner at home, if we cook spaghetti, 2 are happy, 1 is not. If we cook penne, 2 are happy, 1 is not, and it's a different one each time. We can't even agree on the noodle to have.
Oh, we had the same rule, my wife and I, especially when our kids were younger. It was the 1 and 3 rule. 1 and 3 will always be, upset, angry, or they're the only one that's happy. They're the free radical. You went from man-to-man defense to zone defense. It's hard with 3 kids.
It is.
So just as we're wrapping up, what have you been sort of most surprised about and most proud of in terms of your time here so far?
Honestly, I guess maybe building the neighborhood associations I've been able to build.
Yeah, because you didn't really have any before that.
Yeah, I mean, Credit Point has had a long-standing one, and that one's now feeling more mature. I think it's on its 5th or 6th president, and that's a great neighborhood. But it's also like geographically isolated, so it feels like more of a neighborhood. But Hazel Heights, which is Hazel McCallion's old neighborhood in my area, that came together just as I was becoming a councillor. And it was because they had a lot of break-ins. And so we built a neighborhood association there. And we've got some great neighborhood leaders who really brought that together. And I mean, for me, like that's the thing for me is you do this to be grounded. I still knock 1,000 doors every summer and try to get out to meet people. Every time there's something in a neighborhood that gives me an excuse. I guess the most fun thing I've had, which I really want to replicate for every year that I'm on council now, would be movie nights.
Yep.
The movie night in the park. We had 2 of them last summer. We had about 300 at one and about 600 at the other. And people, you know, Joe, I've lived here for 25, 30, however many years. I've never had something in my community park that brought people together like this. You know, people deeply appreciated that and felt connected to their neighbors. And that's why I do this job. I like this job. And so I'm definitely going to do more of that next year. It was a little bit expensive. So I'm going to try to find a little bit of sponsorship.
Well, I think it shows you that people crave community, right? That sense of community, that opportunity to come together as a community. And so, good job, well done. I think you're going to beat your 60% next time around, assuming you're running again.
Yeah, I'm running again. I mean, you know, I've wanted this job for a long time, and I had a lot of great things in my career as a director or vice president at banks. It was exciting to travel the world and have staff all over the place, and you know, I made more money. But you know, this is more rewarding, and that's why I actually did this job. Is because as much as I always say, like being a director at a big company, you still are not the top, and you don't really make the calls. And in this place, you can make real direct change in people's lives, and that's so much more rewarding.
Yeah. So let me end by saying, you know, it's a great place for us to be able to work because we can influence a lot and we can drive the ship on certain issues that we care about, and we can be a cause for change for what we think is good. What's even better is to get to do it with your friends. And so it's been a pleasure working with you over the last 3 years. I hope we get to do that for many more years to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then someday people will tell us it's time to go.
Yeah.
That's the other important part.
And then we'll have to listen to them.
We'll have to listen.
Yeah.
All right.